We don't subscribe to the old school way, nor the new school way, only the optimal way. The 80-20 Baseball Experience with Coach Ball.
Welcome, 80-20 baseball coaches. This week's podcast episode is going to discuss tryout and how, as a coach, you can maximize what you're getting out of tryouts. In other words, how to choose the right players, a system for choosing the right players, and I'm going to give you a bunch of tips here to maximize your tryout experience and your tryout process when it comes to choosing players for your team. Now, I understand not every league and not every situation and not every coach is going to use the same type of tryout process. For this particular episode, we're going to kind of base it around like a league-wide tryout. And I understand there's a lot of tryouts that take place where there's already a team formed and you're bringing players out to try out, whether it's for a couple practices or a few games or a tournament, and you're giving them a tryout with a team that's already built. Tryout situation where you're going out and the league and the organization is hosting a tryout session, or if you're a high school coach and you're having a kind of a mass tryout. So with all that said, let's get into it here. Pay attention to the little nuances that we talk about here and some of the subtleties, and you're going to get a lot of good tips on this, on how to be ready to go out as a coach and get yourself the best team that you can, considering the players that you're pulling from and the players that are available. Number one, make sure you get there early. You don't want to miss any players. And not only do you want to get there early so you don't miss players and you don't miss any of the tryout, you also want to get there early so you can be ready to go. And when I say get there early, be there early, take some time the night before also to prepare. I really recommend, and I highly recommend you getting a list of the attending players. The list is not complete and the league has not completely organized the entire list of players that are signed up for tryouts. That's okay. You can always add a few that show up last minute or that didn't get put on the league tryout list. But I think it's extremely important to have a list of attending players, and I definitely would put them into a spreadsheet or a simple document like a Word document that, has a table where you can do some scoring. And I just think something to organize how you grade the players rather than the thing they hand out at the tryout. And it also allows you to score them in your way, so you can mark off certain columns and grade them on certain things, and we'll get into that here in a second. So get there early. You don't want to miss players. Get there early, not necessarily to get a great spot, because I think there shouldn't be a problem being able to see the players going through the movements and see them out there in the tryouts. I don't think that's a big issue. You're not fighting for a front row concert seat with 100,000 people at the Rose Bowl, right? It's just probably just the coaches in your league. You shouldn't have a problem getting a good seat, but get there early. Have the list of players already set up, and I'll explain to you how I'd like to recommend you setting it up on a spreadsheet or on a Word doc or on, if you use a Mac, the pages, and you can have a table set up ready to go. So get there early. Now I know getting there early seems like something that everybody was just going to do anyways, or something that kind of goes without saying, but I'll tell you a quick story. I actually got my scholarship to Long Beach State, and part of them seeing me and the coaches from Long Beach State, Dave Snow, a Hall of Fame coach, was that they started, it was the area code games, and the games were at Cal State Fullerton, and they started early, and they were going alphabetical order, I believe, and since my last name is Asherbrander, I was at the front of the group, and they started early, and I think the tryouts were supposed to start at 9, and they started at like 8:45. Well, I was done, or maybe they started at 8:30, but nevertheless, they did start before they were supposed to. And so there was still colleges and the coaches from colleges and other scouts, the professional teams still kind of filtering in, coming in with their coffees. And I had already thrown and already pitched. And I noticed by the time I left a few hours later, there were substantially more scouts and coaches. Now, from a player standpoint, kind of sucked because maybe I didn't get as much exposure, but from the Long Beach State standpoint, from the coaches standpoint, they told me later, they said they were super ecstatic because they said I threw really well, but there wasn't a lot of coaches there. There weren't as many coaches and scouts there yet to see me. And so they felt like, maybe they got a sneak peek that the other coaches didn't get. But anyways, get there early. You don't want to miss players. Have a list of attending players before you arrive. All right, now you're going to grade each player's first, their character. And this is the most important thing. You can use a 1 through 5 scale or any type of scale that you're familiar with. I think a 1 through 10 scale is something that everybody's familiar with and kind of understands the value, across the board, like a 10. And we all kind of understand that value. A 1 through 5 also works, with 5 being the best, and say like a 1 through 10 with a 10 being the best. I do recommend you not pick a 7. I think on a 1 through 10, I would make 7 is not an option. Either it's 6 or below or 8 or above. And you're going to score their character, their attitude, their hustle, and their behavior, their coachability, which you might not see the coachability as easily in a tryout because there shouldn't be a lot of coaching going on. It should just be the players, right, going through the process, going through the routine, and you're watching, assessing their skills, their throwing, their running, their hitting, and stuff like that. See if you can pick up on coachability. Attitude and hustle will be extremely apparent. Look for that. And this is going to be the number one grade you give them. On a scale of 1 to 10, you're going to grade their character. Grade them, and do not skew your score because you think the player is the best pitcher in the league. If that player's character is a 3 or a 2 or a 1 or a 0 or a 4, you do not want them on your team if you can help it. Now, if you get to the end of the line and there's only 2 spots left on your team and all the players left are kind of lower hustle guys, maybe they showed the lack of hustle, attitude, the attitude wasn't great, or they responded poorly to making an error, I think that then you can kind of just go from, you can grab the player with the highest score from that as far as character and talent goes. But I would not choose a player that has less than an 8. I just wouldn't do it. I wouldn't go for that talent tease. I like to call it the talent tease. Do not go for it. Avoid that. So any player that scores below an 8 should just be crossed off. And unless, like I said, there are no more players available, and then you just choose the highest character, combination of character and talent remaining. Next, you're going to grade each player's hitting on a scale of 1 to 10. Again, 7 not being an option. I would try to get them to drag bunt. The lower the level you are, I would try to get them to drag bunt so you can see what that looks like. I know you may not be running the tryout, but I think it's important to be able to see the players drag bunt when it comes to players at lower levels. I mean, when I say lower levels, even in high school, but definitely below high school, because those third basemen and those pitchers, their ability to get off the mound, especially those third basemen on a pretty good bunt, at that level, it's really hard. So if you can get a player that can put down a drag bunt, not only can you use that for sacrifice situations, moving runners up, but it also allows you to get the hit with that, and that's huge. Being able to drag bunt, put some pressure on the defense, get a ball thrown away down the line is super, super useful. And at the lower levels, it's very common. And so I think the quality of third basemen, the athleticism, being able to come in, these kids are not quite fully developed. Their coordination isn't quite there. Maybe they're a little longer, a little lankier, whatever it is. Their ability to drop down, scoop a ball, make a throw on the run, and adjust for the angle of that throw as they're running and moving and throwing, it's extremely tough. Anybody who's ever coached quarterbacks knows what I'm saying. I mean, it's just so much easier to set your feet and make a throw than it is to kind of make a throw on the run or a throw off balance. So I'd love to see you guys, coaches, try to get these players to show a drag bunt, because maybe the kid isn't a physical kid, and maybe he's a guy who's not a super imposing hitter, and some guy who's like, you're like, wow, that guy's just maybe he's like a 4 hitter, a 5 hitter, but he's a 9 on the drag bunt, and he's a high quality, high attitude character guy. Take that guy, okay? So you're going to grade their character, their hitting. I definitely think the lower you go, check their bunting skills. And again, I'm not talking about putting the ball in play and that stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about bunting in particular, not just like, oh, can they put the ball in play on the ground and leg it out? Okay. I think that's not as useful as being able to put the drag bunt down at the lower levels. Next, you're going to grade them on their defense and defense in general, because if you may have a guy who's really athletic and get to a ball and then he fits your outfield really well. You may have a guy who's really good on ground balls, but maybe isn't as athletic, but he can fit a lot of roles on the infield. So you're going to grade their defense. You're going to grade each pitcher. All right. And I think the first thing you look at, especially at the lower levels, and probably every level for that matter, is accuracy and control. Don't get caught up in the guy who throws the hardest, unless he also throws a lot of strikes with that velocity. You can grade them different. I know some coaches will grade their arm and their, say on offense, they're hitting and then they're bunting and then their swing differently. I think it's important, I think to just kind of grade it all together. And when I look at things like that, I go, all right, I would look at the hitters and go, what's going to be his ability to produce runs and help to produce runs for our team? And that's really how you're looking at grading him. And so it encompasses ability to hit, quality approach. I think that should be highly prioritized. A quality plan at the plate. Are they just swinging at everything, or do they really know how to swing at the right pitches? Then on defense, look to see how, they're athletic, they make plays, they're good with the glove. Their arm, if it's not great, but they can make a lot of plays, you can fit them in, definitely. And as an outfielder, getting to balls, making plays on balls, fly balls, line drives, cutting off those balls in the gaps, keeping players from getting doubles and triples and things like that. Good reads off the bat. Things like that can be super valuable. So if their arm strength isn't quite there or something like that, they can still be a player that's going to reduce and prevent runs from the opposing team. So that's always important, is just to keep in mind, like when you're looking and evaluating players and trying to get your team better in general, is like, hey, we're trying to score as many runs and produce as many runs as we can. And then we're trying to also reduce and prevent as many runs as we can from our opponent. That's the bottom line. That's all that baseball really boils down to. On a scale of 1 to 10 with your pitchers, grade it all together. But I think you look at control. Do they throw strikes? Okay, here we go. This is something I think is really, I know a lot of that stuff we just discussed there is pretty well known and pretty understood, but here's some stuff that's going to, I think, pique your interest more so because it's something that I think is really important and can really help your team. Here you go. Priorities. Here are the 8 priorities. Number 1, try to get athletic catchers early. Try to get an athletic catcher that hustles early. Try to get 2 of them. For example, if there were, say, 3, let's say there's 4 good catchers in the league that hustle, that have played the position, that understand the position, because catching is a hard position to teach in a season. And it's an isolated position insofar as like when you're teaching your hitters a better plan, or you're teaching them the drag bunt, or you're teaching them how to drive the ball with a little bit more launch angle and things like that, or exit velocity, you can talk to all your hitters pretty much the same way as a group. You're going to have to kind of branch off and then explain it to some of the kids a little differently, because the kids might learn and understand and comprehend and digest it differently. But if you're a good coach and you're articulate and you're concise and clear with your message, you should be able to teach a skill to your whole team, and most all of them will understand it and be able to then go apply it. But when it comes to catching, since it's so different than all the other positions defensively, that you can't really sit there and talk to your catchers while the rest of your you don't want to sit there and talk to your catchers and teach them and explain things to them while the other 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13 guys on your team just sit there and listen and waste their time, because what happens to them doesn't apply. So thus you can branch them off, break them off, get them with another coach, get them with another drill, something like that. But nonetheless, it is a position that you can't really batch. You can't batch your teaching. You can't batch your discussion about the skills and techniques. Thus, I think it's important to get catchers that are already familiar, and you don't have to do a lot of coaching when it comes to understanding the position and the little nuances. Now, they may not get it all, and they may have some things they got to work on. I'm not saying that, but they understand the position, because it does take some time to get familiar and comfortable and understand the nuances, and also react quickly to those little things that happen, like blocking the ball in the dirt. You may get a shortstop and think you can put him behind the plate, and you wonder why all he does is want to scoop balls in the dirt and backhand rather than getting down there and blocking it. And it's not a natural thing for him yet. He hasn't done it enough to where he just sees ball coming out of hand low, the trajectory of the pitch is down. He knows how to break down and square it up and try to get that ball to bounce squarely off his chest protector and stay in front of him. Next thing I think that's really important is to get pitchers that throw strikes. Now, real quick, backing up, catchers, get them early. I just think that if there's 4 catchers, like I was saying, in the league, and you can get 2 early, take them with your first 2 picks. Get 2 athletic catchers, because an athletic catcher or a catcher that understands catching can always play another position, third base, first base. He may be a real good athlete too. He could play, shortstop or outfield. There's good catchers that can play a lot of position, second base. But get 2 catchers early. Get 2 catchers early. Try to pick them early. If your league just doesn't have any good catching, then maybe you back off. But I would still just get the top 2 catchers, the top 2 of the top 4 or 5 catchers, and I would get them with my first 2 picks. I think that is the most important defensive. I think that's the most important position when it comes to producing or preventing runs. And in this case, preventing runs, because it's defense. But I think when you talk about total runs and total run contribution or total run prevention, I think the catching at the youth levels is an absolute must. Good catching is an absolute must. Now, you can say at the major league level, it's a must too, but there's a lot better quality. There's a lot more. You look at 30 major league teams, there's definitely a dozen or so top quality catchers there. But if you look at 30 little league teams, you're not going to have 12 or 15 top quality catchers for the most part. You may have 3 or 4. In my experience, that's what I've seen. So get 2 good catchers early. Trust me on this. Get good catchers early. If it takes your 2 first picks and you let the best hitter in the league slide by, but he's a first baseman, maybe he's a guy who doesn't play a high value. When I say high value, I mean like a guy like catching is involved in almost every play. They're either catching the ball, They're blocking. It's such, I mean, everybody thinks about balls getting by. I mean, every ball that gets by a catcher is essentially kind of like an error for the most part, especially with a runner on. They move up. It's like an error on the shortstop. If your shortstop had 2 or 3 errors a game, you wouldn't keep them there. But good catchers can prevent 2 or 3, especially at the lower levels where pitchers are not throwing perfect strikes and they're bouncing balls and their control of their breaking ball isn't great and they're a little more wild and inconsistent. You want to have solid catching. All right, moving to pitchers. Next thing, I would take 2 pitchers that throw strikes. And I know this is a little bit, you're thinking, this is a little rigid. How do I know who's going to be available? This should be your default plan, and you can always adjust from there. So you want to get the 2 best catchers available with your first 2 picks. You want to get the next 2 picks. I would take 2 pitchers that throw strikes. 2 pitchers that throw strikes, that have clean mechanics, throw strikes. Then my next 2 would be 2 solid hitters with good plate discipline. Now, this is the ideal. These are the ideal selections, and I know things might vary, but I think if you can get 2 athletic catchers, then 2 pitchers that throw strikes, and then 2 solid hitters, that's your first 6 picks. All right, you're not even getting to the back end of your team yet, the back end of the draft, the back end of the tryouts. So you should be able to pick up, if you can get 2 solid hitters, 2 pitchers that throw strikes, and 2 catchers, I think you can develop outfield. You can develop some guys who can field ground balls in the infield. You can develop that. You can also develop the other hitters through practice and batting practice and things like that. You can always snag a guy late who can put down a good drag bunt, a couple of those guys late in the draft that can, at least get something going, especially at the, like I said, the lower levels where the defense is a little shakier, especially at third base, coming in on those drags, things like that. Again, don't take that the wrong way. I'm not saying if you can get a good hitter, and if there's 2 hitters available and one's a really good hitter and one can drive the ball to the gap and one's a drag bunt guy, then you go with the good hitter. I'm just saying that sometimes you can get a good player late in the draft that's a good hustle, good energy guy, a good character guy, but maybe he just can't hit. But you can work on him getting the ball down. I mean, your 10Us, 12Us, 11-year-old teams, 9-year-old teams, 8-year-old teams, if you can put a ball down a third baseman consistently, you might have a 500 batting average at that. And then you teach them how to have a good eye at the plate. So now you get the on-base percentage going with those singles, and that can add up to a pretty good player, even if he can't drive the ball and get those doubles and triples and homers. Now, you get your first 6 players. Ideally, you like to get 2 catchers, 2 pitchers that throw strikes, and 2 solid hitters with good plate discipline, regardless of what defensive position they play. And then from there, you want to choose the most athletic players with the best attitudes. Okay, versatility is important, especially at the lower levels. If there are 2 similar players, always go with the better attitude player. Never fall, like I said, for the talent tees. So after the catchers and the pitchers, don't select based on position. Simply just take the best, most athletic player available that has a character score of 8 or better. Try to avoid projecting. In other words, good players should shine at the tryout. A bad bounce is one thing, but nice swing that hits nothing but air, that's a big red flag. A nice swing that hits nothing, or a player that looks athletic but it just doesn't work hard. Don't think that you can just project out that you think you can just make that player all of a sudden a high hustle guy, or a guy that can all of a sudden start playing really, really well. In other words, don't just go, well, he had a bad tryout. Okay, unless you know the player, then you can maybe ignore the tryout a little bit if you've seen him play for a year or 2 before. But if you've never seen him play and he has a bad tryout, that should be a red flag, okay? And I know it's a small sample size, but it's a red flag in that players should be able to, I mean, tryouts are a big deal, and players should be able to come out and show their best stuff at a tryout. And that doesn't mean on a Tuesday game at like 6 p.m. on a far back field at the park against one of their league opponents. It doesn't mean they're going to have a great game at that time, but they should be able to get it together and be ready to go for the tryout. I think it shows a lot of their confidence and things like that. Okay, so get 2 athletic catchers early, 2 pitchers that throw strikes, then get the 2 most solid hitters with good plate discipline that are available, regardless of what defensive position or regardless of how good they are at defense, because you already took your first 4 picks were really to prevent runs. Athletic catchers, if they can hit, even better. All right, 2 pitchers, again, if the pitchers can hit also, especially at the lower levels, then that even better. But you're focusing on getting 2 athletic catchers and 2 pitchers that throw strikes, and then you got 2 solid hitters. From there, you're going to choose athletic players that are good attitude. Athletic, good attitude players, you can fit them in across the board and fill out your team from there. All right, second to last thing, do not, again, pick a player that has a bad attitude, a low hustle, or poor behavior, or looks to be uncoachable or of low coachability. Don't do it. Do not do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Trust me, it's not worth it. You'd rather have a bunch of 4, 5, and 6 talent kids of that talent level with 9 and 10 and 8, 9, and 10 hustle and attitude scores than you would a bunch of 9s and 10s with talent, but a bunch of 3s and 4s and on the character scale. And don't think you're going to be the player whisperer. You're not going to be the player whisperer, and you're not just going to be able to change these kids overnight. Now, you can definitely add and help players and our youth improve as a coach, but don't fool yourself into thinking you're going to be able to just turn a kid around from a low hustle to a super high hustle across the board. You may, with one kid, be able to get successful with that, but that takes time. And there's a lot more things involved in that with a player and their life than just the baseball field and those 2 to 4 to 6 hours that you see them each week. Just be careful with that. And again, I'm all about helping youth and trying to get players to be better. I'm a big believer in not ruining a team with 1 or 2 bad apples. I'm all about saving the team rather than trying to save one individual and ruin the team and destroy the team or erode the team's chemistry and team culture because of one player. I'd rather that not happen. All right. I'm a big believer in having a great team culture, and that means protecting the team and trying to keep that player that can really bring it down out, trying to keep them out and at least tell them, hey, they got to figure it out. I think one thing that can happen is, and going off on a side note real quick, I think one thing that'll happen over time is if coaches stop picking the low hustle, bad attitude players, I think you're going to see a shift in the overall attitudes with those players. And I'm not saying it's going to be a quick fix and it's not going to fix every kid, but I think when the message gets clear across the coaching and baseball community and the sports community that players with low hustle, bad attitudes and kind of they're into themselves and this sort of thing and they're not coachable, when the message gets out across the board that those players are not being picked or they're being picked last when they used to go first or second or third in the draft, the message is going to get out that they need to shape up. They're going to shape up or they're going to get shipped out, and they're going to see that. And I think that's kind of the big picture that I look at. We got to stop coddling and catering to these low hustle, bad attitude players. And I think once we stop catering to them and stop continuing to pick them so high in the draft and falling for that talent tease, the message is going to be real clear. I got to get this better, and I can't just rely on my arm and my speed and my athleticism. I got to rely on my attitude also. Get those catchers, pitchers throw strikes, solid hitters, athletic players after that. Don't ever go for a talent tease kid. He's got to be a good hard worker. And last, like I said, I was getting to this last point. I think this is super important. Watch the movie Draft Day the week of the tryouts or the night before. If you haven't already seen it, if you have seen it, maybe it's been a while. Draft Day with Kevin Costner came out in 2014. I think it was 2014. Watch it. Watch it the week of tryouts. I don't need to say anything else. Just watch that movie, Draft Day. And it's a good movie, and the message is very clear, and it'll keep you focused on what's important when you're putting your team together. All right, 80-20 baseball coaches. This was how to handle tryouts, how to pick players. On a side note, I guess I should add, if you're having players come out to try out for your team that's already built, so you have a kid come out mid-season or early in the season, or you're a travel ball team and you've been together for a few years and you have a guy coming out to try out, I highly recommend you have him try out for at least 2 practices and preferably at least a game also. Don't just have him try out for 1 practice and then say yes or no. Be very clear. Tell him, hey, this is a trial process. It's a tryout process. It's going to be a multi-practice and a multi-game process. Don't be in a hurry because players can hide their bad attitudes and their low coachability for a practice and sometimes 2. Games are great because games expose players and bad attitudes. It's really hard for players to hide their bad attitudes during the games because of the frustration of the moment, the competitiveness of a game. It kind of exposes the bad attitude and the poor character in a player a lot better. I would definitely recommend you have them come out for 1 practice, at least 1 practice, if not 2, and a game. Definitely want to see him in a game situation. And also you can use the same setup, like you're always looking for catchers to come try out, athletic catchers. Definitely give them a higher nod to pitchers that throw strikes. Kind of the same idea for those coaches that have travel ball teams that are already together or teams that have been together for 2, 3, 4, whatever, 10 years, and you're adding players. You can still take the same fundamentals, I guess those foundational principles of tryouts, and apply them. All right, guys, this has been Coach Bo. Been great. Tryouts, super important. Picking the right players, super important. Super important. Don't fall for that talent tease. Pick some catchers early. Get pitchers that throw strikes and go from there, guys. All right, Coach Bo here, guys. Hey, take it out to the field.
This has been the 80-20 baseball experience.
This is a really good team, and so you have to earn everything you have against them and take opportunities when they present themselves.
Take it to the field.